Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, action.
Wow, these sounds. And so many different phones. Hello?
Alex.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Todd. How are you?
I'm fine. How the heck are you?
Really quickly, before I say anything else, Todd, I want to tell you how much I enjoyed your short story about Spot.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like it kind of does a good job of dovetailing into some of the conversations we might have today because, you know, you touch on dreams and dreams can be lucid or, you know, you can be just at the whims of them. And that kind of gets into A Glitch in the Matrix, which is the documentary we're screening from our website, which I hear that the both of you were kind enough to watch.
But first, you guys must tell us where the story Spot can be read.
Oh, www.exterminatingangel.com and go to EAP the magazine. And it's the first story on there.
What was the full title? Because I'm trying to remember what it was. The title.
The full title of the story?
Yeah.
Spot. It's pretty good.
Awesome.
Just Spot.
Perfect.
Yeah. It's the first chapter of a book I'm working on.
Nice.
Called My Life with Dogs.
Well, spot on.
Yeah.
I'm glad you liked it, Pablo. It's
well,
really...
No, it really actually spoke to me on a very serious, deep level because I've had so many good friends pass away in the last couple of years, and I do feel like when they come and visit me in my dreams that it is a visitation, you know.
Yeah.
So I get it.
It is totally. Well, and I mean, I really did see that too. So, and frankly, I think it really happened. So there you go.
Right. Well, so listen, just to set up for the listeners, we're talking about A Glitch in the Matrix, which is a documentary directed by Rodney Asher. He's someone that people might remember as having directed, you know, I think it was like 7 years ago, he did Room 237, which was about the hidden meanings of The Shining. Kubrick's movie.
I saw that.
Yeah. And then he also did he actually followed that up 3 years later with a documentary that I found equally fascinating because it had to do with sleep paralysis and night terrors. That was called The Nightmare. I have actually had night terrors in the past, and the things that he talked about, or the things that got brought up in that documentary, are all there were. Well, let's just say that they were pertinent to my own experiences. So
I remember you telling me about that.
Yes, I remember too. I remember you describing your dreams, but we won't go into them.
No, well, that's another documentary, or it's a different subject. A Glitch in the Matrix it's a documentary that interviews people who believe that human existence might take place within the context of simulation theory. And it's kind of fascinating because the interviewees are presented as they're avatars, sort of sci-fi, you know, cartoonish kind of avatars, and it also touches on sometimes what might be it's you know, there are clearly some people that read a little too much into the Matrix, or it gets into some dark corners. And you know, people who get a little too obsessed on movies, which I guess is good credentials for Rodney since he did Room 237, where it's people getting really, you know, far into The Shining. And now it's like you got a segment of people who get like really far into The Matrix, among some other things. But it also touches on The Truman Show. And more interestingly, and here's where I'm going to lob off the ball to you guys, because Philip K. Dick gets a nice little chunk of real estate in this documentary. And the both of you visited Philip K. Dick's grave back in the day, right?
We did indeed.
We did indeed.
Yeah. It's close to Boulder. Well, it's not that close, like an hour away.
It's about, I think it was like 100 miles from Boulder, wasn't it?
Was it really?
A place called Fort Lowell.
Gosh. And there was somebody else sitting at his grave when we got there, too.
Yeah, there was somebody else looking for the grave, wasn't there? There was another acolyte like us.
No, he knew where it was.
The graveyard. Oh, he knew.
He knew because he was from that town.
Okay.
Is it a little bit like Jim Morrison's grave, the way it used to be when there was a bust? I believe the bust got taken away because it got ripped off so many times they just stopped even putting the bust out. But back in the day, Jim Morrison would have a bust on his grave, and people would, put artifacts. They would put joints and drinks and all kinds of things as offerings to the dead.
Well, no, I don't think that many people actually knew that he lived, that his body is there. And one thing that was fascinating was he's buried with his twin sister who died shortly after her birth. His parents were broke and they were crossing the country, and they stopped in Fort Lowell to, I think, live with an aunt. It was to stay. It was to stay with because they were broke, so they stayed with a family member there. And while they were there, his mother gave birth to twins, to a little girl and to Philip K. Dick, and they bought a grave plot to put her in. And she
lasted for a little while. I think she lived about 5 weeks, but she was very sick, and then she died. So it was
okay. She was a baby.
So he felt it, and then anyway, sorry.
So then they moved on to Los Angeles, and when he died, he was broke. So they put him in the same plot with his twin sister back in Fort Lowell. And there's a cat. There's no, nobody, it isn't a site of pilgrimage. It was kind of weird that we were there with that guy that day. But the actual monument, the inscription is his name, his sister's name, and there's a picture of a cat in between them.
Well, I saw, I remember the photograph Alex took of that, and that is obviously, as a cat lover, of course I'm going to remember that. But I will step back and just say that it might not be a popular site of pilgrimage, but I have at least 2 or 3 friends that have told me about visiting the grave. So it is, I think, for the people who are Philip K. Dick fans who are in the area, it is a place that gets visited.
You go look for it, and that's the thing. Yeah, and you can find it too. It's not hard to find in the graveyard, is it? We find it without too much struggle.
Yeah. Well, let me ask one more thing, which is that when it's commonly heard that when someone loses a limb, and whether it's war or whatever, some violent act, that there's a phantom limb syndrome where you still think you might have that limb. Do you think that with Philip K. Dick, he might have had like a phantom, sibling or a phantom?
Oh, no question.
Twin?
No question. It's and in fact, it's very strange because in a couple of his books, there's one book where the hero actually has his sister living inside of him, who talks to him.
Talk to Blood Money.
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of twinship stuff going on in Philip K. Dick.
Yes.
So it obviously really, really got to him that he had a sister who died.
And well, Philip K. Dick is just a super interesting person. I mean, he was married a bunch of times. I think he obviously dealt with a lot of some emotional, mental strains and issues, and at the same time also educated in Quaker schools. He attended Berkeley. He graduated. I was just looking at this. He graduated in 1947, the same year as Ursula
K. Le Guin. They were in the same class in high school. In Berkeley, in the same school. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. And they have the same middle initial. It's very odd.
Wow, they do.
Well, it's very odd.
I know, because not many people have K for them.
Well, they do, and not that many people use it in their name.
No.
So Philip K. Dick, Ursula K. Le Guin, it's very... Yeah. I mean, of course, she uses K because her father was Arthur Kroeber, the most famous anthropologist probably that we've ever produced in America. And which is another story. But the glitch in the matrix, I think the most fascinating thing was actually watching Philip K. Dick talking to an audience about his experiences. That was pretty amazing.
I agree. That was a highlight for me. It was a lecture in France, 1977, and it's crazy, but it's the fact that just a person sitting at a microphone talking about some pretty out there ideas. I found that to actually be more riveting, than the avatars and the animation and anything else.
Yeah, we agree.
Yeah.
Both of us agree.
But that's so interesting that the interview was in 77, because that was 4 years after he had what he said was his transcendental encounter with a vast alien intelligent living system, which spoke to him. And various remarkable things he said happened as a result. He wrote several books, including Valis and Radio Free Albemuth, based on this experience, trying to get the word out. And Robert Crumb, the cartoonist, was extremely impressed by what Dick had to say, and produced a comic book describing or depicting Dick's transcendental encounter. And by a suitable coincidence, a piece of synchronicity, the day that we were watching that documentary, I was reading an interview with Dick, and he said this: I have almost 500,000 words of notes on all this, the transcendental encounter. I tried to discuss it with Ursula K. Le Guin, and she just wrote and said, I think you're crazy. She returned the material I sent her.
It's a position, I mean, you could take that position for sure.
Oh, yeah. Wait, so R. Crumb has an illustrated, is this available? Like,
yes, I'm sure you can find it. You can, if you were to search for it online, you could find bits of it, and it is also illustrated in the documentary. Although, because they don't get into his transcendental encounter, they're not really interested in that, because I think it's such a personal thing. They don't really deal with that. They kind of skirt around it. They deal more with alternate reality scenarios, and then veer into the singularity.
Can you fill in the gap right there, though? What was the transcendental encounter? Was it physical, mental, emotional, romantic even, or what was the nature of it?
He just encountered this vast alien living intelligence system, which communicated with him in a very profound way, kind of like some sort of mega acid trip. The only analogy I could think of too.
So it wasn't an anal probe. We're talking about something that was actually intellectual, right? It was on a different level.
Yeah. I mean, it was something. Well, no, it was intellectual. It's beyond intellectual. It was like a spiritual and feeling thing that happened to him as well, and as a result of which, various extraordinary things happened, in which he was able to discover that somebody was like seriously ill and take them to the emergency room and get them fixed, and all. This is the story, but that he told repeatedly, and it was also the story that R. Crumb found sufficiently believable to make a comic book about.
Right, and so I wasn't entirely sure how it fit with the rest of A Glitch in the Matrix, because he didn't necessarily talk. In fact, he didn't talk about about what everybody else was talking about, that the idea that we might possibly be living in a simulation that's been created by somebody else. Did he?
No, he didn't talk about that. That's a different issue from what he was usually.
And there was one, I can't remember what the name of the guy was. There was one guy who appears who's not an avatar, who I actually found the most sensible, because he points out that all of Dick's work has a moral center. It's all about being human and about the desperation to be human in a world that's becoming increasingly inhuman. And the other characters are essentially saying, well, we live in a simulation. What's the point? What's the point of doing anything? Which is a nihilistic point of view that I find a little repellent, personally.
Because if you think of the clips that they were showing from Dick films, they were, I think the filmmaker, he sort of was excited that these features had been made from his books, but the clips didn't show scenes that happened in the Dick stories. You know, they showed characters that weren't in the books. And if you think about the original novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, it's so much more complex and interesting and humane and tragic than Blade Runner. And it has a moment of actual alternate reality in it where Dick, who was writing very fast and was kind of a pulp novelist, kind of retells a couple of chapters but puts them in a different reality where different rules exist and the police station is in a different part of town and entirely different. And then they kind of veer back into the previous reality. And it's so if only they did things like that in films and like followed through with them and didn't just pay lip service to them.
Right. But I think, I mean, to answer your question, Todd, I think the way that it kind of fit into the documentary was they were basically cherry picking all these different movies that kind of touch on the topic. And so many of those movies that they touch on were originally authored by, you know, Philip K. Dick. So that it's not just Blade Runner, but, you know, they also mention A Scanner Darkly and Total Recall and Minority Report.
Total Recall has does have a bit of that because he does, you know, at one point the whole thing might just be in a medical building, right? And then they veer back into the story again. So that's true. That's quite faithful to the Dickian storytelling mode.
It is kind of odd, though. It is odd how people misinterpret Dick, but on the other hand, it's very, very difficult to do an adaptation of a really good book for a film. It's easier to turn it into something else, really, which is what I think they did with Blade Runner, and that's certainly what they did with The Man in the High Castle, which is nothing at all like the Philip K. Dick book, not even slightly. But anyway. But this is kind of off the subject of the documentary, which, let me repeat, it's fascinating to watch Philip K. Dick in this documentary.
Yes, it's really worth watching. It's very interesting.
I'd never seen him talking like that, ever. And it's a must for Philip K. Dick fans to watch this documentary, but also for anybody else who's interested in science fiction and interested in the singularity and interested in Elon Musk, pro or con. In my case, con, definitely.
One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting, I mean, aside for, and by the way, just for anyone listening, it's a lot of movie references, and yeah, Philip K. Dick highlight for sure, but it does, you know, it broadens the parameter of the conversation. It goes back to Plato's cave as well as to some essential things regarding, you know, what is the human central nervous system, and then like computers and to what extent computers might eventually have something that is analogous to a human central nervous system. And interestingly, if AI becomes conscious and then subject to even what happens if it becomes subject to more pain and misery than even humans currently manifest among, you know, ourselves, each other. So there are other things that get raised by the doc.
Other 1950s science fiction concepts, yeah. You just need to delve back into the pages of Fantasy and Science Fiction and Galaxy and Analog, and all this stuff will be thoroughly covered. I don't know if these are really things that should concern us in the 2020s. I think we have other things to think about, but that's just my old-fashioned opinion.
Right. Well, you know, either way, I'm so glad that you both watched it, that you also found the same parts interesting as I did.
Yeah, it's worth watching from that point of view for sure. The footage of Dick, and also to hunt out the R. Crumb cartoon about his transcendental encounter. That would fill in the gap in the documentary.
And Chris Ware's interview is really interesting too, the cartoonist Chris Ware. And it's very interesting to watch the avatars, although
they go on a bit, though. They don't change. They don't. By the end, you don't want to see the avatar anymore.
But definitely interesting to see it. It was definitely an interesting way to present. And then, of course, there's the horrifying scenes at the end, which I will not give away. They're so horrifying. But if you like horrifying scenes, you are going to be really horrified by these.
Yeah. No. Well, I will only add to that to not give too much away that there is something called the Matrix defense. which will remind people who, when they come across it, a little bit of the Twinkie defense, perhaps.
No, it's actually totally horrible. I mean, but yeah. Anyway.
But he's right. It's the same as he's right. It's the same as the Twinkie defense, which was Dan White killing Harvey Milk, especially because he'd eaten so many Twinkies.
Yeah.
But let me just reassure everybody that movies don't actually have that kind of power to move to horrific acts.
It's bogus. Well, I mean, I think there was some. Sorry.
I will say, however, to interject a little bit, that when Jaws came out, it was so popular, and I love Jaws. It's a great story, and it's well told, but it also had a very real world, impact on the sharks of the world, because so many people then went out and started killing sharks that it actually had a perceptible measure of depleting the oceans of sharks. So we have to be careful about the fact that movies do have they do have an impact, and that gets back to the Matrix defense, where we have an individual who watched one movie a lot over and over to the point that he eclipsed everything else that should have been happening in his life, and it had horrific consequences.
But why do we even care about this individual? You're talking about one person, and this is built up into like a gigantic thing, and we're having a conversation about it. There are lots of nutty people in this world who murder other people, for all kinds of perverse reasons, But basically, the reasons don't go back to movies; they go back to things that happened to them and how they were abused in their childhood.
Yeah, no, I totally, I'm with you on that.
We're dealing with a false construct, which is that movies can actually create these monsters. What do you think, Todd?
Well, in this particular case, and everyone should go and watch the documentary and decide for themselves. In this particular case, I think there was an awful lot that was untold about that story.
Yeah,
for obvious reasons. But it seemed incredibly unbelievable that the end would have happened as a result of him watching a movie.
Yeah, no, there was more afoot. Absolutely. Yeah. There was more afoot.
There were more terrible things in the movie, and so it's a kind of a straw man.
Yeah. So that was very interesting too.
Yeah. Well, oof,
yes, it is very interesting.
It's intense, the documentary. It's a very intense documentary, Bob.
Well, I have to say, having this conversation makes me, it reminds me of the fact that I need to maybe go visit Philip K. Dick's grave, because I have not gone, and it's right there, apparently just 100 miles away from me. So,
well, you were very close to it one time, because I remember one time you went out there to spend a couple of nights camping and attending a rock and roll show very close to Fort Lowell.
Well, I missed my chance then, and I'm going to have to redress that.
I know why you missed your chance, because the thing was, they woke all of you guys up at 6 a.m. by playing Money for Nothing extremely loud over the speakers twice. And you all had hangovers, and none of you could get back to sleep, and the rock and roll experience was ruined, and you didn't see Philip K. Dick's grave.
Oh, this sounds fascinating, actually, Pablo. Maybe, we have to get together. You have to tell me about this at some point. Hey, so I wish I was back there so we could go together to Philip K. Dick's grave again.
Well, are you ever going to come back to Colorado, or are you just is it Oregon for a while?
It's Oregon for a while. Well, definitely not by air for a while.
Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
My days at Denver International Airport are over, I'm afraid. But
well, the blue stallion with the red blasting lasers of death misses you.
The Demon Sentinel of Denver. That's a wonderful statue.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, thank you both so much for joining on today's talk. And if for those people listening, we've been discussing the latest documentary by Rodney Asher, A Glitch in the Matrix. You can watch it at internationalfilmseries.com. Yeah, absolutely. We'll be here next week. Alex, Todd, thank you so much. And let's all hope for some dreams, whether it be of Electric Sheep or of Spot or of fallen comrades. Those are always welcome dreams.
Yeah. Hope for sweet dreams for everybody.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care, you two.
Okay. Thanks, Pablo. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Always a pleasure to have you.
Always a pleasure. And sweet dreams are made of cheese?
He's
Who
trying to
am
sing
I
with him, and I'm not going to.
disagree. Don't you like cheese?
Who doesn't like cheese? All right. See you too. Ciao.
And cut. Okay, that's a wrap.
Thanks again for joining Alex Cox and myself today. I'd like to thank Jason Phelps for handling the audio and Ted Thacker for letting us use the intro to his song, The Ballad of Slim Cessna, for the musical cues that bookend these conversations.